The conference room felt like a courtroom, and I was already guilty before I'd even spoken a word. Rachel Martinez sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against her leather portfolio. Around her, 5 other executives stared at me with the kind of cold detachment that comes right before someone's world gets turned upside down. I'd been at Sterling Dynamics for 3 years, pouring my heart into product concepts that I knew could change everything. But as I looked at their faces that morning, I realized they'd already made their decision about my future. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The presentation I'd prepared was still warm in my hands, 27 pages of market research, consumer behavior analysis, and product mockups that had taken me 6 months to perfect. My concept wasn't just another gadget or software update. It was a complete reimagining of how people could interact with sustainable technology in their daily lives. I called it EcoFlow, and I genuinely believed it could revolutionize the entire clean energy sector while making it accessible to everyday families. But as I opened my mouth to begin my pitch, Rachel's assistant whispered something in her ear, and I watched her expression shift from professional indifference to something much colder. "Save your breath, Elena," Rachel said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "We've already heard enough." The words hit me harder than I expected. I'd been with Sterling Dynamics since graduating from MIT, working my way up from junior analyst to senior product strategist. I'd helped them launch 3 successful product lines, each one exceeding profit projections by at least 30%. My teams consistently delivered results, my presentations were always thorough, and my dedication was never questioned. Until now. "I don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The market research shows overwhelming consumer demand for integrated sustainable solutions. The prototype testing exceeded every benchmark we set. The projected revenue streams alone would justify the initial investment within 18 months. Marcus Webb, the head of innovation, leaned back in his chair with a smirk that I'd grown to despise over the years. He was the kind of executive who took credit for other people's ideas while contributing nothing but buzzwords and corporate politics to actual progress. "Elena, your problem isn't your research," Marcus said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Your problem is that you think small. You see individual products instead of ecosystem integration. You focus on consumer needs instead of market domination. You lack the vision necessary to operate at our level." The accusation stung because it was so fundamentally wrong. My entire career had been built on seeing possibilities that others missed, on understanding connections that weren't immediately obvious, on imagining solutions that could serve both profit margins and genuine human needs. "That's not true," I replied, standing straighter. "EcoFlow isn't just a product, it's a platform. It's designed to integrate with existing home systems while creating new opportunities for expansion into commercial markets. The scalability potential is enormous, and the social impact could position Sterling Dynamics as the industry leader in responsible innovation." Rachel's laugh was sharp and dismissive. She'd built Sterling Dynamics from a small consulting firm into a major player in the technology sector. But somewhere along the way, she'd lost sight of what actually mattered to the people who bought their products. "Social impact doesn't pay bonuses, Elena," she said. "Market leadership isn't about responsibility, it's about dominance. And frankly, your idealistic approach to product development is holding this company back from reaching its true potential." The room fell silent except for the subtle hum of the air conditioning system. I could feel the weight of 3 years of late nights, weekend research sessions, and passionate brainstorming meetings pressing down on my shoulders. Every innovative concept I'd proposed, every market analysis I'd conducted, every consumer insight I'd uncovered, suddenly felt meaningless in the face of their dismissal. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly, but with absolute conviction. "EcoFlow represents the future of this industry. Consumer preferences are shifting towards sustainable solutions. Regulatory frameworks are evolving to support clean technology. And early adoption advantages in this space could establish market position for decades." Thomas Rivera, the chief financial officer, finally spoke up from his corner of the table. He'd always been more numbers-focused than vision-oriented, but I'd respected his analytical approach to business decisions. "Elena, we've run the projections," Thomas said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your concept requires too much upfront investment with too much uncertainty in return timelines. The board wants proven strategies with predictable outcomes, not experimental ventures that might pay off eventually." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not heartbreak exactly, but the sound that dreams make when they hit corporate reality. I'd spent months refining every aspect of EcoFlow, from the initial user interface design to the supply chain optimization strategies. I'd interviewed hundreds of potential customers, analyzed competitor weaknesses, and identified market gaps that seemed tailor-made for our company's strengths. "So you're rejecting 3 years of research and development because it requires actual vision?" I asked, no longer trying to hide my frustration. "Because it asks you to think beyond quarterly profit reports and consider what this company could become, instead of just what it's always been." Rachel's expression hardened into something that looked almost personal. She'd never liked being challenged, especially by someone she considered subordinate to her authority. But I was beyond caring about office politics and corporate hierarchies. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Your employment with Sterling Dynamics is terminated, effective immediately," Rachel announced, her words falling like a gavel. "Security will escort you out. Your access cards and company equipment need to be surrendered before you leave the building." The finality in her voice was absolute, but instead of feeling defeated, I felt something unexpected rising in my chest. It wasn't anger, though that was certainly there. It wasn't disappointment, though I'd be lying if I said the rejection didn't hurt. It was clarity. I gathered my presentation materials, tucked them carefully into my briefcase, and looked around the room one final time. These people had just made the biggest mistake of their professional lives, and they didn't even realize it yet. "You'll regret this decision," I said, not as a threat but as a simple statement of fact. When EcoFlow disrupts this entire industry, when sustainable technology becomes the only viable path forward, when consumers demand the kind of innovation you just rejected, you'll remember this moment. Marcus laughed again, but there was less confidence in it this time. "Good luck with that, Elena. The real world isn't as simple as your academic theories and consumer surveys. Building actual businesses requires understanding markets, not just dreaming about changing them." I smiled for the first time since entering that conference room. It wasn't a pleasant smile, but it was genuine. They thought they were ending my story, but they'd actually just given me the freedom to write it myself. "We'll see about that," I replied, walking toward the door. "We'll see about that very soon." The security escort was unnecessary but expected. As I cleaned out my office, packing 3 years of work into cardboard boxes, I could feel my former colleagues watching me through their glass-walled offices. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed relieved that the disruption was over, and a few appeared genuinely confused about why I was being let go so abruptly. Sarah Chen, my former research assistant, approached me as I was taking down the whiteboard covered in EcoFlow development timelines. "This is crazy, Elena," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Everyone knows your work is solid. The EcoFlow concept could have been huge for this company." I paused in my packing, looking at Sarah's earnest face. She was brilliant, dedicated, and exactly the kind of person who deserved to work for a company that valued innovation over politics. "Sarah, let me ask you something," I said quietly. "Do you believe in EcoFlow? Not as an employee following orders, but as someone who understands technology and market potential?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Absolutely. It's the most innovative concept this company has seen in years. The integration possibilities alone could create entirely new revenue streams, while actually helping people reduce their environmental impact." I finished packing the last of my personal items and turned to face her directly. "Then come with me," I said. "I'm going to build EcoFlow anyway, and I'm going to need people who understand the vision." Sarah's eyes widened, but before she could respond, I was already walking toward the elevator, carrying my boxes and my determination in equal measure. The parking garage felt like a threshold between my old life and whatever came next. As I loaded my belongings into my car, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had been my faculty advisor at MIT, a brilliant engineer who'd left academia to start her own venture capital firm, focused on sustainable technology investments. If anyone would understand what I was trying to build, it would be her. "Jennifer, it's Elena Vasquez," I said when she answered. "I have a proposition for you, and I think you're going to want to hear this." The conversation that followed lasted 47 minutes and ended with a meeting scheduled for the following morning. As I drove home through the afternoon traffic, I wasn't thinking about what Sterling Dynamics had taken from me. I was thinking about what they'd accidentally given me, the motivation to prove them completely, utterly, and profitably wrong. That evening, I spread the EcoFlow materials across my dining room table and began making lists. Not just of technical requirements and market strategies, but of every person I knew who shared my vision for what technology could become when it served people instead of just shareholders. My phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "I quit today. When do we start?" I smiled as I typed back, "Tomorrow morning. Bring your research files and your best ideas. We're going to change everything." The apartment felt different that night, charged with possibility instead of weighed down by corporate limitations. I'd been fired for lacking vision, but they'd just freed the very person who was about to prove that vision was exactly what their industry desperately needed. By midnight, I had the framework for not just a product launch but a complete market disruption strategy. Sterling Dynamics thought they were protecting their position by eliminating what they saw as idealistic thinking. Instead, they'd just created their most dangerous competitor, and I was going to make sure they knew it. 6 months later, I stood in the gleaming lobby of the TechCrunch Disrupt conference, watching Rachel Martinez step out of a black sedan with the same confident stride she'd used to fire me. She had no idea that the keynote speaker she was about to hear was the same woman she'd dismissed for lacking vision. The irony was perfect, almost poetic in its timing. EcoFlow hadn't just launched successfully, it had fundamentally altered the entire sustainable technology landscape in ways that even I hadn't fully anticipated. The prototype that Sterling Dynamics had rejected was now powering homes across 12 states, generating revenue that exceeded my most optimistic projections by 300%. The journey from that humiliating conference room to this moment had been anything but smooth. Those first few weeks after leaving Sterling Dynamics were filled with 18-hour days, sleeping on Jennifer's office couch and living off coffee and determination. Sarah had brought not just her research expertise but 3 other engineers who believed in what we were building enough to leave their secure positions for equity, in a company that existed only on paper, and in our shared conviction that we could change everything. Jennifer's venture capital firm had provided the initial funding, but more importantly, she'd connected us with a network of advisors who understood both the technical challenges and market opportunities we were pursuing. Dr. Marcus Thompson, a former Tesla engineer, joined as our chief technology officer after seeing our energy integration algorithms. Lisa Park, who'd spent 5 years building supply chains for Apple, became our operations director when she realized we were solving problems that major corporations had been ignoring for decades. The first 3 months were pure execution mode. While Sterling Dynamics continued developing incremental improvements to existing product lines, we were building something entirely new from the ground up. EcoFlow wasn't just a smart home device. It was an ecosystem that learned from user behavior, optimized energy consumption in real time, and connected households to a broader network of sustainable resource sharing. The technology was complex, but the user experience was elegantly simple. Our breakthrough came when we realized that individual efficiency gains could be amplified through community networking. A neighborhood of EcoFlow-enabled homes could collectively reduce energy consumption by up to 40%, while actually improving comfort and convenience for every household. The data we collected wasn't just about usage patterns, it was about how people actually lived and what they needed from their technology to make sustainable choices feel natural rather than sacrificial. The beta testing phase revealed something that traditional market research had missed entirely. Families weren't just interested in reducing their environmental impact, they were excited about having real control over their energy costs and consumption. Parents loved showing their children how their daily choices affected both their household budget and their carbon footprint. Young professionals appreciated having detailed insights into their consumption patterns without needing to become energy experts themselves. By month 4, we had partnerships with 3 major homebuilders who wanted to integrate EcoFlow into their sustainable housing developments. 2 utility companies had reached out about pilot programs that could help them manage grid demand more effectively. A major retailer was interested in our data analytics platform for optimizing their own energy usage across hundreds of locations. The market validation was overwhelming and undeniable. The media attention started gradually, then accelerated rapidly. TechCrunch featured us in their emerging startups section. The Wall Street Journal ran a profile on sustainable technology companies worth watching. Forbes included me in their under 30 list for clean energy innovation. But the moment I knew we'd truly disrupted the industry was when I received a LinkedIn message from Marcus Webb, asking if I'd be interested in discussing partnership opportunities with Sterling Dynamics. I screenshot that message and printed it out, not out of spite, but as a reminder of how quickly circumstances can change when you're building something that actually matters. The same executive who'd dismissed my vision 6 months earlier was now trying to position his company as an early adopter of the innovation they'd rejected. The audacity was remarkable, but it also confirmed that we'd created something genuinely transformative. The manufacturing phase required scaling our operations from prototype development to mass production, while maintaining the quality standards that early adopters had come to expect. We partnered with a factory in Austin that specialized in sustainable electronics manufacturing, ensuring that our supply chain aligned with our environmental values. Every component was sourced responsibly, every packaging material was recyclable, and every shipping method was optimized for minimal carbon impact. Our customer service approach became another differentiator in a market where most technology companies treated support as an afterthought. Every EcoFlow installation included a virtual consultation with one of our energy optimization specialists. Users received personalized recommendations based on their specific household patterns and goals. Our mobile app provided real-time feedback and suggestions, but always in language that was accessible and actionable rather than technical and overwhelming. The financial results spoke for themselves, but the customer testimonials told the real story of what we'd built. Families were saving an average of 35% on their energy bills while reducing their environmental impact by even greater margins. Apartment dwellers who'd never had control over their energy consumption were discovering possibilities they hadn't known existed. Small business owners were finding ways to reduce overhead costs while improving their sustainability credentials with customers who increasingly cared about environmental responsibility. The competitive response from established companies was predictable but ineffective. Several major corporations announced their own sustainable technology initiatives, but their products were clearly rushed to market, without the foundational research and user-centered design that had driven EcoFlow's development. They were trying to catch up to a moving target while we continued innovating and expanding our platform capabilities. Rachel's appearance at the TechCrunch conference wasn't coincidental. Sterling Dynamics was hemorrhaging market share to companies like ours that understood where the industry was heading. Their stock price had dropped 12% over the previous quarter, as investors realized that their product portfolio was increasingly obsolete in a market that demanded both innovation and environmental responsibility. The keynote invitation I'd received wasn't just recognition of EcoFlow's success, it was confirmation that we'd fundamentally altered the trajectory of our entire sector. Standing backstage, reviewing my presentation notes one final time, I thought about the moment 6 months earlier when Rachel had told me I lacked vision. The irony was that her inability to see beyond quarterly profit reports had prevented Sterling Dynamics from being part of the solution we were now implementing at scale. They'd chosen to protect their existing market position instead of pioneering the future, and that decision was now costing them everything they'd thought they were preserving. My presentation that day wasn't about revenge or vindication, though both felt satisfying. It was about demonstrating what became possible when technology development was driven by genuine understanding of human needs, rather than corporate politics and risk aversion. The audience of investors, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders represented the next wave of innovation, and they needed to understand that sustainable technology wasn't just an ethical choice. It was the only viable business strategy for companies that wanted to remain relevant. The statistics I shared were impressive, but not surprising to anyone who'd been paying attention to market trends. EcoFlow had captured 11% of the smart home energy management market in just 6 months. Our customer retention rate was 97%. Our Net Promoter Score exceeded industry benchmarks by 40 points. But the number that really mattered was the cumulative environmental impact. Our users had collectively reduced their carbon emissions by the equivalent of taking 14,000 cars off the road permanently. During the question and answer session, a journalist asked about the challenges of building a company around sustainable technology in a market dominated by established players focused on traditional profit models. My answer was simple. We hadn't built our company around sustainable technology. We'd built sustainable technology around what people actually needed and wanted from their homes and their daily lives. The environmental benefits were significant, but they emerged naturally from designing better solutions rather than being imposed as external requirements. The networking reception afterward provided the real validation I'd been seeking. Venture capitalists approached me with expansion funding offers. International distributors wanted to discuss global licensing agreements. University researchers were interested in collaboration opportunities that could advance both academic understanding and practical implementation of sustainable technology systems. The conversation had shifted from whether sustainable technology was viable to how quickly it could scale to meet growing demand. Rachel didn't approach me directly during the reception, but I could see her watching from across the room, clearly recognizing that the woman she'd fired for lacking vision was now being celebrated as an industry leader whose vision had proved both correct and profitable. The validation felt good, but it was secondary to the satisfaction of knowing that EcoFlow was genuinely improving people's lives while demonstrating that environmental responsibility and business success weren't competing priorities. The flight home that evening gave me time to reflect on everything that had changed since that morning in Sterling Dynamics' conference room. The company we'd built wasn't just successful, it was meaningful. Our employees weren't just executing someone else's vision, they were contributing to solutions that mattered. Our customers weren't just buying products, they were participating in a movement toward more thoughtful, sustainable, and ultimately more satisfying ways of living. The next morning brought news that confirmed what the TechCrunch presentation had suggested. 2 major investment firms were interested in providing Series B funding that would allow us to expand into commercial and industrial markets. The technology we'd developed for residential applications could be adapted for office buildings, manufacturing facilities, and retail locations, creating opportunities for impact that extended far beyond individual households. Sarah knocked on my office door with a tablet displaying our latest user analytics. The data showed that EcoFlow households were not only reducing their own energy consumption, but influencing their neighbors to adopt more sustainable practices. The social impact was amplifying beyond our direct customer base, creating community-level changes that traditional marketing and education campaigns had struggled to achieve. We weren't just selling technology. We were catalyzing behavioral shifts that had implications for entire neighborhoods and cities. The email notification on my phone showed a message from Sterling Dynamics' board of directors requesting a meeting to discuss potential acquisition terms. I forwarded it to Jennifer with a note suggesting they were about 6 months too late for that conversation. We'd built something that couldn't be bought, replicated, or retrofitted into an existing corporate structure that had already demonstrated its inability to recognize innovative opportunities. By the end of that week, trade publications were analyzing what they called the EcoFlow effect on the sustainable technology sector. Our success had validated the market demand for integrated environmental solutions, encouraging investment in similar startups while pressuring established companies to reevaluate their product development strategies. The industry conversation had shifted from whether sustainable technology could be profitable to how quickly companies could adapt their offerings to meet evolving consumer expectations. Standing in our expanded headquarters, watching our engineering team collaborate on the next generation of EcoFlow capabilities, I realized that being fired for lacking vision had been the best thing that could have happened to my career and to the industry we were now helping to transform. Sometimes the biggest favor someone can do for you is to get out of your way and let you prove them wrong at scale. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.